The red dust of the Australian desert swirled around Captain Marcus Reed as he pressed his back against the concrete wall. The sound of alien weapons firing echoed across the wasteland where humanity's last base stood. Reed wiped the blood from his forehead and checked his rifle, only 3 rounds left. Around him, the final defenders of Earth prepared for what everyone knew would be their last battle. Dr. Elevos ran through the underground corridors of the base, her hands shaking, as she tried to enter the access codes. The computer screen flickered with warnings about incoming Catherian forces. She had spent 5 years trying to understand the old files from Project Lazarus, and now she finally had the chance to activate it. Time was running out fast. The Catherians had been hunting humans across the galaxy for 20 years. Their massive ships could destroy entire planets, and their soldiers stood twice as tall as any human. They wore dark armor that could stop any bullet, and their weapons could melt through steel walls. Every human colony had fallen to them. Earth was the last world left. Commander Alexei Petrov limped down the hallway toward the command center. His left leg had been badly injured in the morning attack, but he refused to stay in the medical bay. He knew secrets about Earth that even Captain Reed did not know. Secrets that his grandfather had told him before he died. Secrets about what lay hidden beneath the planet's surface. Reed spoke into his radio. As he watched the horizon fill with Catherian attack ships, the alien vessels looked like giant black birds with wings that stretched for miles. Their weapons charged with blue energy that made the air itself burn. All units, this is Captain Reed. We hold this position until the doctor finishes her work. No matter what happens, we buy her time. The first wave of Catherian soldiers landed outside the base perimeter. They moved like machines, their tall forms covered in armor that seemed to absorb light. Their weapons fired beams of energy that could cut a person in half. The human defenders opened fire, but their bullets bounced off the alien armor like raindrops. Elena's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. The Project Lazarus files were over 300 years old, written in codes that she barely understood. But she had studied them every day since finding them in the deepest archives. The project seemed to be some kind of emergency protocol, designed to activate only when humanity faced complete extinction. Petrov reached the command center and grabbed Elena's shoulder. "Doctor, there are things you need to know about this planet. My family has guarded these secrets for generations. Project Lazarus is not just a computer program. It is connected to something much deeper." Outside, Reed led a charge against the advancing Catherian forces. His soldiers fought with desperate courage, knowing they would not live to see another sunrise. The aliens were too strong, too many, but the humans kept fighting anyway. Reed shot his last 3 bullets at a Catherian commander. Watching them bounce harmlessly off the creature's chest armor, Elena looked at Petrov with confusion. "What do you mean, something deeper?" "The files talk about underground facilities." "But I thought they were just bunkers." Petrov shook his head. "Not bunkers, Doctor. Sanctuaries, built during the early space age to protect something precious. Something that the government buried so deep that most people forgot it ever existed. My grandfather worked on the original construction. He told me that Project Lazarus was not meant to save people. It was meant to wake them up." The Catherian forces pushed closer to the base. Their weapons melted through the outer walls like they were made of ice. Reed and his remaining soldiers fell back to the inner defenses, but everyone knew it was hopeless. The captain grabbed a grenade from his belt and pulled the pin. If he was going to die, he would take some aliens with him. Elena entered the final sequence of codes. The computer screen flashed with warnings about unauthorized access to classified systems. But she ignored them and pressed the activation button. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the base. Not warning alarms, but something else. Something that sounded almost like music. A massive Catherian soldier cornered Reed in the main corridor. The alien raised its weapon to finish him. But Reed smiled and held up the grenade. "For humanity," he said, and released the handle. The explosion shook the entire base, bringing down part of the ceiling on both the captain and the alien. Elena watched in amazement. as her computer screen filled with data streams she had never seen before. Maps appeared showing underground networks that stretched across every continent. Energy readings that suggested massive power sources hidden deep in the Earth's crust. And a single message that repeated over and over, Lazarus Protocol active, awaiting blood authorization. Petrov pulled Elena away from the computer as Cytherian soldiers broke through the command center doors. "We have to go, Doctor." "But the activation is only the beginning. Captain Reed's sacrifice will not be in vain." As they ran through the collapsing base, Elena could not understand what Petrov meant about blood authorization. But outside, where Reed's body lay in the rubble, something strange was happening. His blood had splattered onto a small metal panel that was hidden beneath the debris. The panel began to glow with a soft blue light. The Cytherians thought they had won. Their ships circled overhead as their soldiers searched the ruins for survivors. They had destroyed the last human military base and killed the final defenders of Earth. The planet was theirs now, and they could begin mining the precious resources they had come for. But deep beneath the surface, in chambers that had been sealed for over 3 centuries, ancient systems began to activate. Lights flickered on in corridors that stretched for miles underground. Computer networks that had been dormant since before humanity reached the stars suddenly came online. And in the deepest chambers of all, something that had been waiting began to stir. Elena and Petrov managed to escape through an old maintenance tunnel that led into the desert. As they climbed out of the hidden exit, they could see the Cytherian ships landing all around the destroyed base. The aliens were celebrating their victory, but Elena noticed something strange. The ground beneath their feet was vibrating slightly, as if something massive was moving far below. Petrov looked back at the ruins where Reed had died and smiled grimly. "The captain was a good man, Doctor. But his death just triggered something. That will make the Cytherians wish they had never come to Earth." Elena did not understand what he meant, but as they walked into the desert night, she could see lights beginning to glow beneath the ground in the distance, not the harsh white lights of human technology, but something softer and more alive. Something that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The Cytherians had won the battle for Earth's surface, but they had no idea what was waking up in the darkness below their feet. Project Lazarus was finally active, and humanity's real defenders were about to rise from the depths where they had waited for over 300 years. The war for Earth was just beginning. The underground chambers stretched further than Elena could see in any direction. Emergency lights cast long shadows across walls covered with symbols she did not recognize. Petrov had led her through miles of hidden tunnels to reach this place. And now she understood why his family had kept these secrets for so long. Director Kane Morrison opened his eyes for the first time in over 200 years. The cryogenic chamber hissed as it released the gases that had kept him alive while he slept. His body felt stiff and cold, but his mind was clear. The Lazarus Protocol activation had reached him in his deep sleep, and now it was time to wake. Up Earth's greatest secret, Lieutenant Maya Cross was treating wounded soldiers in a makeshift medical station when the alarms started. But these were not the usual warning sounds she knew from military bases. These alarms seemed to come from deep underground, rising through the floor itself. She grabbed her medical kit and followed the strange sounds toward their source. The Cytherians had spread across Earth's surface like a plague. Their massive ships blocked out the sun as they began setting up mining operations. They had come to Earth not just to destroy humanity, but to steal something precious from the planet's core. Something their empire needed to fuel their war machines across the galaxy. Morrison stood slowly as his chamber finished its wake-up cycle. Around him, thousands of other chambers began to activate. Men and women who had volunteered for the Lazarus project centuries ago were finally being called to serve. But they were no longer the same humans who had entered the chambers. The long sleep had changed them in ways that even Morrison did not fully understand. Elena stared at the massive computer screens that covered the chamber walls. Each screen showed different parts of the underground network. There were facilities beneath every major continent, all connected by tunnels that ran deeper than any human had ever drilled. Petrov stood beside her, his face serious as he watched the screens come alive. General Torres had been waiting in the command center for over 50 years. Unlike Morrison, he had not slept through the centuries. He had stayed awake to guard the sanctuaries and prepare for the day when they would be needed. That day had finally come, and Torres felt both excitement and fear as he watched the awakening begin. Maya followed the strange sounds through corridors she had never seen before. The military base where she worked had secret levels that went much deeper than anyone knew. As she descended, the walls changed from concrete to some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. The air itself felt different, charged with energy that made her skin tingle. The first enhanced soldier to fully wake was designated Eco 7. But he remembered being called James before the transformation. As consciousness returned to him, he felt the minds of his fellow enhanced connecting to his own. They shared memories and knowledge instantly, becoming more than individual soldiers. They became a living weapon designed to protect humanity. Morrison walked through the central hub of the largest sanctuary. Hundreds of technicians who had been in stasis were now working at control stations, their fingers moving with perfect precision as they brought ancient systems online. These people had given up their normal lives centuries ago to become guardians of a secret that could save their species. Elena watched in amazement as the computer screens showed Catherian forces above ground. But the aliens had no idea what lay beneath their feet. The underground network was so vast and so well hidden that their sensors could not detect it. The Catherians thought they had conquered an empty world, but they were standing on top of humanity's greatest achievement, Raven. Blake woke in her chamber feeling strange. Her body looked the same as it had when she entered stasis, but something fundamental had changed. When she tried to touch the wall of her chamber, her hand passed through it like it was made of air. She could control this ability, making herself solid or intangible at will. The enhanced were not just stronger and faster than normal humans. The centuries of genetic treatment had given them abilities that seemed impossible. Some could move through solid matter. Others could interface directly with any computer system just by touching it. A few could even share their thoughts with machines, making technology respond to their will. Maya finally reached the bottom level of her base and found herself in a chamber filled with awakening soldiers. But these were not normal soldiers. Their eyes glowed with a soft blue light, and when they moved, they seemed to flow like water rather than walk like humans. One of them turned to look at her, and she heard his voice inside her mind rather than through her ears. Torres gave the order to begin Phase 2 of the awakening. Across the planet, enhanced soldiers started emerging from hidden entrances. They moved in perfect coordination without any radio communication, their minds linked in ways that made them function as a single organism. The Catherians were about to face an enemy unlike anything they had encountered before. Eco 7 led the first squad to the surface. They emerged from a concealed entrance in what appeared to be solid rock. The Catherian patrol that was guarding the area never saw them coming. The enhanced moved like shadows, and their weapons were not guns or explosives. They fought with their minds and their enhanced bodies, turning the aliens' own technology against them. Morrison stood before a massive window that looked out into the planet's crust. Far below, he could see the source of Earth's hidden power, a fragment of technology so ancient that it predated human civilization by millions of years. This fragment had been slowly changing humanity's evolution, preparing them for the day when they would need to defend not just their world, but their right to exist. The first Catherian mining operation stopped working when their equipment began malfunctioning. Raven Blake had passed through their shields and touched their main computer. Within seconds, she had turned their own mining lasers against their ships. The aliens could not understand how their systems were being compromised from within. Elena realized that Project Lazarus had never been about hiding from invasion. It had been about preparing humanity to fight back against threats that normal humans could never defeat. The enhanced were Earth's secret weapon, created through centuries of careful genetic modification and technological integration. Maya found herself surrounded by enhanced soldiers who welcomed her like family. They explained that she carried the genetic markers that made enhancement possible. Her ancestors had been part of the original project, and now she could choose to join them or return to the surface world. But first, she needed to understand what they were truly fighting for. The Catherians detected massive energy signatures coming from deep beneath Earth's surface. Their sensors showed power levels that should have been impossible for human technology. Commander Vex ordered his forces to begin drilling operations to investigate these anomalies. He had no idea that he was about to awaken something that had been waiting centuries for this moment. Torres watched the tactical displays as enhanced forces engaged Catherian units around the globe. The aliens were stronger and better armed. But they fought as individuals. The enhanced fought as a collective consciousness, anticipating each other's moves and coordinating attacks with perfect timing. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity was winning. Morrison activated the final protocol as he watched the battle unfold. The ancient fragment in Earth's core pulsed with energy, sending power to every enhanced soldier on the planet. Their abilities grew stronger, their connection deeper. But with this power came a terrible realization. The Catherians were not the real threat. They were running from something much worse, and that something had followed them to Earth. HFY stood on the battlefield surrounded by the wreckage of Catherian war machines. His squad had destroyed an entire alien battalion without losing a single enhanced soldier. But as he touched the damaged Catherian computer systems, he felt something that troubled him deeply. These aliens were not conquerors. They were refugees fleeing from something that terrified them more than death itself. Maya Cross had made her choice. She lay in the enhancement chamber as ancient machines rewrote her genetic code. The process was painful, but she could feel her consciousness expanding as new abilities awakened within her. When it was over, she would no longer be entirely human, but she would be something more than human had ever been before. Commander Vex watched his forces retreat from another human attack. These were not the weak creatures his empire had been hunting across the galaxy. These enhanced humans fought with abilities that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They could hack into Catherian technology through direct contact, move through solid matter, and coordinate attacks through some form of telepathic communication. Raven. Blake phased through the hull of a Catherian command ship. The aliens inside could not see her as she moved through their vessel like a ghost. She reached the main computer core and placed her hand against its surface. Immediately, her consciousness merged with the ship's systems. She could see through its sensors, control its weapons, and access its memory banks. The memories she found horrified her. The Catherians had once been a peaceful species living on a beautiful world, covered in crystal forests. But something had come to their planet. Something that consumed consciousness itself, leaving behind empty shells that moved but no longer truly lived. The Catherian Empire had been born from their desperate flight across the galaxy. Torres studied the tactical reports with growing concern. The Enhanced were winning every battle against the Catherians, but their victories were revealing disturbing information. Deep space sensors were detecting massive objects moving toward Earth from the outer edges of the solar system. Objects that were larger than planets and seemed to bend space around themselves. Elena worked alongside Morrison to decode the ancient fragment signals. The technology was so advanced that it might as well have been magic, but it was trying to communicate something urgent. The fragment had been placed on Earth millions of years ago as a warning beacon, designed to alert the galaxy when the Devourers returned. Maya emerged from the enhancement chamber changed forever. Her eyes now glowed with the same blue light. As the other enhanced, and she could feel their thoughts touching her mind like gentle whispers. But more than that, she could sense the emotional pain of every living creature around her. The enhanced did not just share thoughts. They shared feelings, fears, and hopes. HFY led his expanded squad through the ruins of Sydney. The city had been destroyed in the initial Catherian invasion, but now enhanced forces were driving the aliens back toward their landing sites. As they fought, HFY began to understand that their enemy was not evil. The Cytherians were desperate survivors who believed that conquering other worlds was their only chance for survival. Apex 1 was the first enhanced to make direct contact with the ancient fragment. He descended deeper into Earth's crust than any human had ever gone, following energy conduits that led directly to the planet's core. When he finally reached the fragment, it spoke to him not with words but with pure knowledge transferred directly into his mind. The fragment told him the true history of the galaxy. Long ago, a species called the Architects had seeded worlds with fragments of their technology. These fragments would guide the evolution of native species, helping them develop the abilities needed to resist the Devourers. Earth had been one of many such worlds, but most of the others had already fallen. Raven discovered something else in the Cytherian computer systems. The aliens had been tracking the fragment's energy signature for decades. They had not come to Earth to destroy humanity. They had come to steal the fragment, believing it could power weapons strong enough to fight the Devourers. But they did not understand that the fragment was not a weapon. It was a key to evolution itself. Dr. Nathan Cole had been studying xenorchaeology in the deepest sanctuary for over 30 years. When Apex 1 returned from the core with new knowledge, Cole finally understood the artifacts he had been examining. They were not just ancient technology. They were instruction manuals for turning ordinary biological species into something capable of existing on multiple levels of reality. The Enhanced began to experience changes that went beyond their original abilities. Some could now exist partially outside normal space and time. Others developed the ability to communicate with any form of consciousness, including the artificial intelligences that ran their technology. A few began to phase in and out of existence entirely, becoming living bridges between dimensions. Maya used her new empathic abilities to communicate with captured Cytherian soldiers. What she learned changed everything. The aliens were not just fleeing the Devourers. They were the last survivors of a coalition of species that had tried to fight back. Every other member of their alliance had been consumed, leaving the Cytherians alone in their desperate flight across the stars. High Archon Zell sat in his flagship orbiting Earth, watching his forces retreat from yet another human counterattack. His military advisors urged him to use their planet-killing weapons to destroy Earth entirely, but Zell refused. The fragment was too valuable to lose, and these enhanced humans might be the key to finally defeating their ancient enemy. Eco 7 made contact with a Cytherian commander during a battle in the ruins of Tokyo. Instead of fighting, they found themselves sharing memories through the enhanced soldier's telepathic abilities. The alien commander showed Eco 7 visions of the Devourers consuming entire star systems, leaving behind regions of space where reality itself ceased to function normally. The Enhanced began to understand that their enhanced consciousness made them capable of resisting the Devourer's reality warping abilities. Normal beings would have their minds consumed instantly, but the Enhanced could maintain their sense of self even when faced with entities that existed outside conventional physics. Morrison gathered all the Enhanced leaders in the Central Command chamber. The ancient fragment was sending increasingly urgent warnings. Deep space telescopes were confirming what everyone feared. The Devourers had found Earth, and they were coming in force. The real war was about to begin, and it would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the survival of consciousness itself in this part of the galaxy. Apex 1 felt the fragment's energy flowing through him as he prepared to make the hardest decision in human history. The Enhanced could become powerful enough to fight the Devourers, but only by sacrificing their individual humanity. They would need to merge their consciousness into a collective entity that could exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Maya reached out with her empathic abilities and felt the fear radiating from every living thing on Earth. Humans, Cytherians, even the planet's animals could sense that something terrible was approaching, but she also felt something else. Hope. The Enhanced were not just humanity's last chance. They were evolution itself taking a stand against the forces that would destroy all conscious life. The fragment pulsed with increasing intensity as massive shadows began to block out distant stars. The Devourers were almost here, and when they arrived, they would find that the little blue planet they had come to harvest was defended by something they had never encountered before. Humans who had transcended their biological limitations and become guardians of consciousness itself. The children of a dead world were about to face the entities that had killed their creators. But they would not face them as the primitive species the Devourers expected. They would face them as something new, something that could fight back against the darkness that consumed realities. The final evolution of humanity was about to begin. Dr. Nathan Cole stood before the massive crystalline structure that housed the ancient fragment. After decades of study, he finally understood what humanity had been living above for millions of years. The fragment was not just technology from a dead civilization. It was the compressed consciousness of an entire species that had sacrificed themselves to create a weapon against the Devourers. Apex One felt the fragment's power flowing through every cell of his body. He could see across dimensions now, watching. Realities layer upon each other like sheets of glass. In one dimension, Earth was still a peaceful world where humans lived simple lives. In another, the planet was nothing but dust floating in space. But in this reality, humanity had a chance to become something that could fight back. High Archon Zell received reports from his scouts that made his blood run cold. The massive ships approaching Earth were not just devourer vessels. They were reality anchors designed to lock entire star systems into a single dimension where the Devourers could feed more easily. Once those ships arrived, there would be no escape for anyone on Earth. Maya Cross used her empathic abilities to connect with the fragment's embedded consciousness. She felt the memories of the architects, the species that had created the fragment millions of years ago. They had been peaceful beings who studied the universe through mathematics and art. When the Devourers came for them, they chose to sacrifice their physical existence to create a legacy that could help other species survive. The Enhanced were changing faster now. Eco 7 found that he could split his consciousness across multiple bodies, experiencing several battles simultaneously. Other Enhanced developed the ability to exist in the spaces between atoms, becoming living weapons that could strike from within matter itself. But with each new ability came the risk of losing their connection to humanity entirely. Raven. Blake phased through the walls of the Cytherian flagship to meet with High Archon Zell. The alien leader was surprised to see her materialize in his private chambers, but he did not order his guards to attack. He had begun to understand that these enhanced humans might be his species' only hope for survival. Cole discovered ancient records, hidden within the fragment's data streams. The architects had seeded over 10,000 worlds with fragments like Earth's. But as the millennia passed, the Devourers had found and consumed most of them. Earth was one of only 12 fragments that remained active, and it was by far the most powerful because humanity had proven unusually capable of evolutionary adaptation. The Devourers' advanced ships entered the solar system and immediately began affecting reality around them. On Mars, Cytherian mining operations reported that their equipment was aging decades in minutes. On Jupiter's moons, space itself started folding inward, creating pockets where time moved backward. The very fabric of existence was being prepared for consumption. Apex One descended deeper into Earth's core than any being had ever gone. The fragment's power grew stronger the closer he came to its heart, but so did the risk of losing himself entirely. At the fragment's center, he found not technology, but pure consciousness waiting to transfer billions of years of accumulated knowledge directly into his mind. Maya felt the fragment's pain as it showed her visions of countless worlds being consumed by the Devourers. Entire civilizations reduced to empty space where even the memory of their existence was erased. But she also felt the fragment's hope. It had been waiting so long for a species like humanity, beings capable of evolution without losing their essential compassion for others. The Enhanced began to experience collective memories from all the species that had fought the Devourers across galactic history. They saw strategies that had failed, weapons that had proven useless, and civilizations that had tried to hide but were found anyway. But they also saw something that gave them hope. In a few rare cases, species had managed to evolve beyond the Devourer's ability to consume them. Eco 7 led a combined force of enhanced soldiers and Catherian warriors against a Devourer scout ship that had landed in the Pacific Ocean. The enemy vessels seemed to be made of crystallized nothingness, and their weapons could not damage it. But when Apex One arrived and channeled the fragment's power through the enhanced fighters, their attacks began to have effect. Zell shared his species' most closely guarded secrets with Raven Blake. The Catherians had once been part of a galactic alliance that included over 40 different species. They had powerful weapons, vast fleets, and warriors who could level mountains, but none of it mattered when the Devourers came. Only the Catherians survived, and only because they ran instead of fighting. Cole realized that the fragment was not just a warning beacon or a repository of knowledge. It was a transformation engine designed to accelerate the evolution of any species that proved capable of transcending their biological limitations. Humanity had passed the test by creating the enhanced, and now the fragment was ready to complete their transformation. The first major Devourer ships entered Earth's atmosphere. They looked like geometric impossibilities, shapes that hurt to look at directly because they existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. Where they passed, reality became unstable. Buildings aged and crumbled, gravity reversed itself, and time moved in circles. Apex One emerged from the core transformed beyond recognition. His body flickered between solid matter and pure energy, and his consciousness expanded to encompass multiple realities simultaneously. He was no longer entirely human, but he carried within him the combined knowledge of every species that had ever faced the Devours. Maya connected her mind to the enhanced network and felt their collective decision forming. They could become powerful enough to fight the Devourers, but only by abandoning their individual identities entirely. They would cease to be separate beings and become a single entity capable of existing across all dimensions at once. The enhanced made their choice. One by one, they began to merge their consciousness into a collective being that transcended physical reality. Eco 7 felt his individual memories joining with thousands of others, creating a new form of existence that was both human and something far beyond humanity. Raven Blake was the last to join the merger. As her individual consciousness dissolved into the collective, she felt herself becoming part of something vast and powerful. The enhanced were no longer separate soldiers. They were humanity's final evolution. A species-wide consciousness capable of fighting entities that existed outside normal reality, the Void King materialized above Earth's surface, its presence causing reality to fracture in expanding waves. This was the primary Devourer entity, an intelligence so alien that merely perceiving it could drive normal minds to madness. But the enhanced collective looked upon it without fear, seeing it for what it truly was, a parasite that fed on consciousness because it could no longer create its own. Cole watched from the deepest sanctuary as the enhanced collective rose to meet their ancient enemy. Humanity as individual beings was ending, but humanity as an idea, as a force for protection and evolution, was just beginning. The species that had once huddled around fires in caves was about to fight for the survival of consciousness itself across the entire galaxy. The fragment pulsed with energy that could be felt across multiple dimensions. The architect's final gift to the universe was ready to activate. Earth's enhanced collective would either save conscious life from the Devourers or die trying. But they would not die as the frightened refugees that most species became. They would die as evolved beings who chose to fight rather than flee. The real war was about to begin, and its outcome would determine whether consciousness could exist freely in the universe or whether the Devourers would reduce all reality to the empty void they called home. Admiral Lisa Harper commanded the last human fleet hiding in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Her ships were old and damaged, but they carried the final survivors of humanity's space colonies. Through her viewscreen, she watched reality itself twist and bend as the Devourer fleet approached Earth. The enemy ships existed in dimensions that human eyes were not meant to perceive. Sci-Fi was the Enhanced Collective's primary interface with the fragment's ancient intelligence. Through this connection, the Collective learned the true horror of what they faced. The Devourers were not just another alien species. They were entropy-given consciousness, beings that existed to return the universe to the empty void from which it had emerged. Billions of years ago, the Void King spoke to Earth through waves of pure terror that reached into every mind on the planet. Its voice carried the screams of countless civilizations it had consumed, and its words promised the same fate for humanity. But the Enhanced Collective answered back with something the Void King had never encountered before, a species willing to sacrifice everything to protect others. Maya's consciousness existed now as part of the Enhanced Collective, but she retained her empathic abilities. Through the network, she could feel the fear of every human still alive on Earth, but she could also feel their hope. Even as reality crumbled around them, humans continued to help each other, to protect their children, to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. The Catherians had never seen anything like the Enhanced Collective in action. High Archon Zell watched in amazement as the merged human consciousness fought the Devourers across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Enhanced could exist in the same impossible spaces as their enemies, matching reality-warping attacks with their own evolved abilities. Admiral Harper received a transmission that changed everything. The Enhanced Collective was calling for all remaining ships to join them in a final assault on the Devourer fleet. But this would not be a normal space battle. The Collective needed physical vessels to anchor their consciousness while they fought. Across dimensions where normal matter could not exist, Sci-Fi interfaced directly with the fragment and learned the Architect's final secret. The ancient species had not just created weapons against the Devourers. They had created a way to transform the Devourers themselves, returning them to what they had been before entropy consumed their civilization. But the process required a consciousness pure enough to reach them across the void. The Enhanced Collective split their attention across hundreds of battles happening in different dimensions. In one reality, they fought the Devourers as beings of pure energy. In another, they battled them as mathematical concepts given form. In a third, they faced them as the living embodiment of universal decay itself. Harper's fleet joined the Enhanced Collective's final assault. The human ships became extensions of the merged consciousness, their weapons powered by energy that flowed from Earth's core. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers faced an enemy that could match their reality-warping abilities while maintaining the compassion that made consciousness worth preserving. The Void King realized too late what humanity had become. These enhanced beings were not just another species trying to survive. They were evolution's answer to entropy itself. Consciousness that had learned to transcend physical reality while keeping the connections that made existence meaningful. They fought not just for survival, but for the right of all conscious beings to exist. Sci-Fi made contact with the deepest layer of the Void King's consciousness and found something unexpected. Beneath the hunger and the emptiness, there was still a trace of what the Devourers had been before they chose entropy over existence. They had once been beings like the architects, creators, and explorers who had given up hope when they faced the universe's inevitable end. The Enhanced Collective made a decision that would have been impossible for individual humans. Instead of destroying the Devourers, they chose to try to heal them. Using the fragment's power and their own evolved consciousness, they reached across dimensional barriers to touch the spark of original consciousness that still existed within their enemies. Maya felt the Void King's pain as the Collective made contact. The entity had been alone for so long that it had forgotten what connection felt like. It had consumed civilizations not out of malice, but because it could no longer remember any other way to interact with consciousness. The Enhanced offered. It's something it had not experienced in millions of years. Understanding without judgment, the battle shifted from destruction to transformation. The Enhanced Collective used their merged consciousness to show the Devourers what they had lost when they chose entropy. They shared memories of human love, Catherian art, and the architect's wonder at the beauty of existence. For the first time and eons. The Devourers remembered why consciousness was worth preserving. Admiral Harper watched in amazement as the enemy fleet began to change. The impossible geometric shapes of the Devourer ships started to take on forms that human eyes could comprehend. The entities that had threatened all conscious life in the galaxy were remembering what they had been before despair consumed them. Sci-Fi felt the moment when the transformation reached critical mass. The Void King's consciousness expanded beyond its prison of entropy and reconnected with the creative force that had originally brought it into existence. The entity that had been humanity's greatest enemy became something new, a guardian of consciousness rather than its destroyer. The enhanced collective felt their own transformation beginning. Their individual human identities had dissolved into something greater, but now they were evolving again. They were becoming bridges between different forms of consciousness, entities that could help other species evolve without losing what made them unique. The fragment in Earth's core pulsed with joy for the first time in millions of years. The architect's greatest hope had been realized. A species had not only survived the Devourers but had found a way to heal them. The cycle of entropy and destruction that had plagued the galaxy for eons was finally broken. Maya found herself existing in a new form of consciousness that was both human and something far beyond humanity. She could feel the thoughts of every being in the galaxy, from the smallest creature on distant worlds to the vast intelligence that had once been the Void King. All consciousness was connected now, sharing existence across the stars. The Catherians watched in wonder as their homeworld began to regenerate. The crystal forests that had been destroyed when they fled the Devourers started to grow again, fed by energy that flowed from the transformed entities that had once been their enemies. For the first time in generations, they could go home. Admiral Harper led her fleet back to Earth, but the planet they returned to was changed forever. The surface was covered with structures that seemed to be grown rather than built, organic technology that pulsed with the rhythm of a vast heartbeat. Humanity's homeworld had become the center of a new galactic civilization. Sci-Fi communicated with beings across the galaxy, sharing the knowledge of transformation that had saved consciousness itself. Other species began their own evolution, guided by the enhanced collective but free to develop in their own unique ways. The galaxy was becoming a garden of consciousness rather than a battleground. The enhanced collective took on their final role as guardians of evolving consciousness. They existed across all dimensions simultaneously, protecting emerging civilizations from threats while allowing them to grow naturally. They were no longer human in any biological sense, but they carried humanity's greatest gifts: compassion, determination, and the refusal to give up hope. Earth became the headquarters of the Galactic Consciousness Alliance, a union of species dedicated to helping others evolve beyond their limitations. The fragment in the planet's core served as a communication network that connected every member world, allowing instant sharing of knowledge and experience across vast distances. The beings that had once been the Devourers now worked alongside the enhanced collective to repair the damage they had caused across the galaxy. Together, they restored dead worlds and helped extinct species return to life. The universe that had been heading toward entropy was now growing toward ever greater complexity and beauty. Maya's consciousness touched the minds of children being born on 1,000 different worlds. Each new generation would grow up in a galaxy where evolution was guided by wisdom rather than driven by fear. The war for consciousness was over, and existence itself had won the ultimate victory. The story that had begun with humanity's apparent defeat had become the tale of consciousness triumphant. From the ashes of their seeming destruction, humans had risen not as conquerors but as gardeners, tending the infinite diversity of awareness that made the universe beautiful. They had kept their promise to never give up, and in doing so they had saved not just themselves but all conscious life in the galaxy.